Hello and welcome back to Java Programming. In this video, I want to introduce you to the enhanced for loop. Up until now, or I should point out where I am in the lecture notes. So back in chapter 5, and we're in the section more about looping. So Java has three types of loops. The standard for loop, and that's here. We've been using that up through this semester, and it's probably very, very similar to the for loop that you guys used in JavaScript. We've also used the while loop. So the while loop is here, and that was kind of the first one that we started off with this semester. So that too, very similar to JavaScript, should be familiar to you. And we've also talked about how to break out of a loop using the break statement. So an example of this, which should look familiar from the Kennel application, and you'll be using something similar in your project as well. The one that I want to talk about is the enhanced for loop. This is like a for each that some of you might be familiar with. This has been part of Java since Java 5, so it's been around for quite a while, and it's preferred by a lot of developers over the standard for loop for a few reasons. Here we have to deal with this index, we have to know when we're going to stop, and we have to remember to increment. And so that's all in one line, which makes it a little bit nicer than the while loop. But I don't necessarily want to have to think about, well, how many things do I have in my list? So that's where the enhanced for loop is really nice. In the enhanced for loop, we can simply say, for everything, or for each thing in my list, do something. And so here I've got my list, so name array. So imagine that's a list of strings, or an array of strings. And then when I pull something out, I'm simply going to specify the type and give it a variable name. So every time I iterate through that array, I'm going to be able to refer to each item in the index as just name. So I think this is probably best shown as a demo, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Before I do, I just want to show you the Oracle documentation for this as well. So if I search Oracle Java enhanced for loop, if you just want another take on this, here the very first result from the Java tutorials is the for statement. And so this is going to talk about the traditional for statement, which has that initialization point, the termination, and what we're incrementing, and along with an example here of how that might look. And then the enhanced for is introduced with a similar example. So here we have an array of numbers, those numbers are being placed in, and then here we iterate over the numbers, pulling out each number, which is an int, so the type is going to match up here, and then that each item that's pulled out is going to be referred to here by a variable called item, so we can refer to that here. So what's nice is I don't have to deal with that kind of clunky counter down within my loop. So let's go ahead and rewrite, or actually let's just write the loop for the vehicle, because we don't have that in here right now. So inside of the vehicle factory, we'll add in, starting our vehicle, we'll loop through all the vehicles and call start on each one. So the traditional for loop would have looked something like this. I would have had to have a counter, an int, counter, set that to 0. Then I need to think about when I want to stop. So while counter is less than the size, so this was an array list, remember, so on list of vehicles, I have a method called size. So iterate through until the counter hits the size, and that should be our stopping point. And then I need to increment my counter. So it's then at this point that I would add my curly braces and do something. So on my vehicle, I have to use list of vehicles, and here I would do a get, right? Because we've got the get method available on array list. And I need to pass to that then the counter so that I get the proper index. And then from that, I could string together dot notation to call the start method. Start, not start all vehicles, but start my vehicle. And I need to just double check what that method was. Yeah, it was just start. So then I could call start here. Now this is chaining together a couple of calls. So on the list of vehicles, I'm getting a vehicle at a particular index, and then I'm starting that vehicle. So I could also write that as vehicle vehicle equals, and then get out my vehicle. So list of vehicles dot get my counter. And then I would call start on that vehicle. So I'm going to comment this out and just put a comment here. This line is equivalent to lines 51 and 52. Okay, so this is chaining together a couple different method calls, and here I'm breaking that down so it's a little bit more straightforward. So let's make sure that this works, and then we're going to rewrite this as the enhanced for loop. So compile looks good. Let's go ahead and run. And now we can see our vehicle. We've still got these system.out.println lines that I was using as a debugging demo. And then we have the output here. Null, I just haven't populated that particular piece of data, so that's why we're seeing null there. All right. So let's go ahead and now rewrite this as an enhanced for loop. So we've got that, and I'm going to do that right below this so we can kind of keep our eye on both of those. I'm going to add a system.out.println line in here so that we know what information is coming from where. So this, I'm just going to add a line that says enhanced for loop output follows. And I'm also going to add a blank line in here just to keep things a little bit easier to read once we start getting so much output, especially when it's duplicate output, it gets a little bit harder to read. Okay, so now the enhanced for loop. So we start off with the keyword for, a space, and then parentheses. And now if we think about the different components that I needed in the regular for loop, essentially I ended up with an object reference variable of type vehicle, and I also had my list of vehicles. Those are kind of the key players that I need. So I need to do the same thing. I need a way to refer to each of the things that I'm pulling out of my list. The type is going to be vehicle. My object reference variable name, I'm going to name that vehicle1 so that I don't end up with a conflict with my previous variable name there. A colon. So for each vehicle in is how I would read this in my list of vehicles. And now every time I loop through, vehicle 1 is going to represent the next or the current item in my list. So the first time through, you can imagine that that's grabbing the item at index 0, then index 1, and in our case we only have the 2 vehicles. So here now I can use vehicle referring to this variable name, or vehicle1, and I can call the start method on it. So while this may be new for many of you, if you haven't worked with a for each before, it might seem a little obscure because we don't see the counter and we don't see it checking, the size being checked. However, I think for me at least, this is much, much easier to read. I don't have to worry about making sure that I've got the right number, that I've got that counter set up, and it reads a little bit easier for me as well. So for each vehicle in the list of vehicles, start the vehicle. So let's make sure that things are working, that I've got the syntax correct. Do the compile. All right, and I have forgotten, it looks like a semicolon, of course. So again, reading the error messages in vehicle factory, line 56, a semicolon is expected. And it's indicating to me where I need that semicolon. So let's head to line 56, pop that in there, and then let's come back and recompile. That looks good, and let's give it a run. Oops, not vehicle test drive, we need the factory test drive. There we go. There we go. So the same output for our traditional for loop and the enhanced for loop. So output, those two lines are exactly the same, so we're accomplishing the same thing. I encourage you, now that you know the enhanced for loop, to start practicing with it. You're going to see this in industry far, far more than you're going to see that traditional for loop. All right, that is it for the for loop. Please reach out with any questions, comments. Looking forward to hearing from you and seeing your work for this unit. We'll see you next time.